After looking around the room for 2 minutes, my wife says, I can't find the case for wood. Wood. It looks kind of like an ambigram. You know, one of those things that it's like, if you switch it around, then it's supposed to look the same, but of course, in this case, it looks like a completely different word. That's really funny, though. You would think from, like, the context clues, like the fact that the 18 plus is also upside down, like, what does she think, that 8L, you know, plus 8L, I wonder what that means, you know, kind of like, I don't know. Anyway, but I guess it might be a little bit confusing with the green label at the bottom. Not sure. Looks like that's also upside down. Don't know. But yeah, people who don't play games really don't know exactly where to put the things. A review of different controllers. PS4, Xbox One, Steam, EA, Electronic Arts. Yeah, they want all the money they can get. Once again, you know, I don't really blame them. A company's got to make money. But I think that they are very greedy in how they go about it. And that's just from a gamer's perspective. Maybe it's because I'm a cheapskate, you know, I'm a broke boy, you know, just I can't afford all of the stuff that EA puts out. But it really does kind of turn you off to the company when you go to play a game that you expect to be fully functional and have all the stuff that you want in it, and then 90% of the stuff that you want in it is behind a paywall. And they knew that that would be what people wanted, and that's why they put it behind a paywall after you already paid for the game, knowing that you'd want those stuff. So it's one of those things that it's quite unfortunate, and EA does get a lot of slack for it when there are tons of companies that do this. Even, especially mobile companies. Mobile companies will do this for their games every single time. Like, it gets pretty bad. How I see my controller, like a normal controller. How my parents see my controller, like airplane controls. Yeah, no, it is one of those things that unless you grew up playing multiple different controller styles, there are controller sets or setups that are going to be completely foreign and alien to you. It's one of those things that it's like, you know, oh, the slang of today. Well, no, it's the controllers of today. I still can't wrap my head around the keyboard and mouse setup. Like, I have to have a controller in my hand. Somebody using keyboard and mouse, that to me looks like they're trying to control an airplane. It's way too complicated for me. It makes it very difficult for me to position my fingers exactly where I want them to be. And then things don't exactly go according to plan. So, yeah, no, I know exactly how this feels because that happens to me with keyboard and mouse setups. Car salesman slaps cuckoo. Run. No. It's one of those one of the stereotypes of car salesmen. They're always like slapping the hood or slapping the top of the car, and you don't want to do that with a cuckoo. I mean, those things will get you a pretty good distance. If you've ever seen the Ocarina of Time, in fact, you know, in a lot of the Zelda games, cuckoos are quite the means of transportation. You get them and you hop off a high enough place and they'll carry you onwards for quite a ways. Fortunately, you slap one of them and you are pretty much dead. You have to get to a different loading zone or anything in order to unload all of the attacking cuckoos, but usually they give you a few shots before that happens. Anyway, yeah, definitely don't go to a cuckoo salesman because this probably happens quite often. I'm really enjoying this popular new game. Let's see what people online think about it. This is the worst game ever made. Never again. Yeah, I think that that's kind of how I feel about Lords of the Fallen and a few of the other games that have come out recently, is that they're really fun and interesting in their own right, but you go and you try and explain that to somebody online and they're gonna attack you because they don't like it. My whole opinion on that is people are gonna like and not like what they like and don't like, so don't worry about it. If you like it and you want to talk about it, go ahead, talk about the things that you like about it. see what other people don't like about it. That's kind of the point, you know. You have the interaction to see the things that other people didn't like and the things that other people did like. It's very unlikely that you are the only person in a particular cadre. You've got to think, if only 1% of the world agrees with you, and there's 7 point some odd billion people in the world, that means that there's at least 70 million people in the world that agree with you on your own stance on certain things. So it's probably less than that often, because I mean, I imagine that a lot of people don't have the same access as you do to whatever it is that you have. But it is one of those things that it's like, even inside the United States, 300 million people, 1% is 3 million, so at least 3 million people in the United States would agree with you on whatever opinion you have. So that's a pretty good number. Speaking of bad games, Skull Island, Rise of Kong, gonna be like, I will finish what you started. Yeah, the Star Wars reference. But, yeah, both games are really bad. I watched the full playthroughs of both games, and I know a lot of the popular game streamers had the audacity to play both of them, and yeah, both are bad. They're really bad. But I mean, you get good games. There have been some really excellent releases this year. Lords of the Fallen, Liza P, so many great games. Baldur's Gate 3, a lot of really great ones. You've got to expect the other end of the spectrum as well. You know, it's wherever there is a lot of really great games, there's going to be some really bad ones too. So you can never have one without the other. Everything has to be in balance. My custom character fighting against the main boss. This is one of those ones that it's like as well, oh yeah, my the silly armor, stuff like that, in a cutscene, and yeah, you can do some really interesting stuff, especially with RPGs. Like, make your character look really weird, and then it just, when they cut over to cutscenes and stuff like that, especially action RPGs, they just sit there and it looks silly, looks ridiculous, but it's fun. I mean, that's kind of part of the fun of it, is the fact that you make this silly character and you can kind of dunk on these bosses and make it a really kind of comedic effect, a comedic event, where you're fighting this boss who's supposed to be big, scary, and hard, and you're dunking on him with this like silly looking Elmo character. So yeah, it's part of the fun of these types of games, and I think that's why they allow you to do it. Is that obviously they can sit there and adjust the cutscenes so that you are in default gear or whatnot, which a lot of games do as well. But when they allow you to do stuff like this, then it gets really funny, and it really adds to the playability of the game. When someone plays one of my favorite games after my recommendation, but doesn't enjoy it, you are just playing it wrong. And that's possible. I mean, you never assume that you're playing the game correctly. A lot of times you'll find things that even in your wildest dreams you never would have imagined as a developer that somebody would find in your game. But that's just how it is. I mean, you like a game doesn't mean everyone's gonna like a game. Like, I know that there are several games that I really enjoy that very, very few people actually enjoy. But it's just part of being a gamer. You like certain niches, and certain things kind of hit that itch for you, whereas other things, they just aren't that interesting, and other people really like them, and maybe sometimes you like them for a while, and then you just don't like them anymore. This is one of those things. So when you're a gamer, just remember, not all of your recommendations are going to be good for everyone. It's personal preference, okay? There are a lot of people who don't want to play Mario Maker. They have no problem watching people play Mario Maker, but they don't want to play it themselves, and that's fine. If we had everyone wanting to play Mario Maker, nobody would watch those streamers. Those streamers wouldn't be able to make a living off of it. So that's what you do. You just enjoy what you got. Give an Eevee a Thunderstone, you get a Jolteon. What happens if you donate money to an Eevee? Patreon. Okay, I have an Eevee, and I would really like it to evolve into a Patreon. No, I actually do have Patreon, but that's more set up for the future. You know, when I actually get people following me and subscribing and liking what I do. Might not ever happen. So that account might always remain at absolutely nothing. But prepare for the best, and I guess hope for the best as well in this case. In the end, it definitely does look like something that Pokemon would come out with, and it does fit with the naming convention as well. So I like it. I like this particular meme. Pokemon is one of my favorite games, and it was the one that really got me started when I was in first grade, I think it was. I had a friend named Steven who he sat there and he gave me his Game Boy and a copy of Pokemon Gold, and from there I was absolutely hooked as a gamer from that moment on. Of course, you know, I watched my Aunt Jill. She was in the basement. She played Legend of Zelda, and that really got me intrigued in the Legend of Zelda and gaming there. But my first ever personal game system that I owned was that Game Boy Color with the Pokemon Gold. It was really awesome and started a lifelong obsession with this stuff. So my wife might not appreciate Steven that much, but I do. Thank you, Steven, wherever you are. My nightmare when I was a kid. My nightmares now as an adult. Holy cow, that thing was really creepy. That really upped the creep factor of that game. And I think that it's kind of like when you do the horror games and you go through the horror game for the first time, and like all those jump scares and those things really get to you, and then as you play it more, then it's less so. But when you faced those things in the Metroid the Metroid game that came out for the Switch, Metroid Dread, that's what it was, then man, the music changed, the little noise they made, and the fact that they were constantly coming after you, they were fast and unbeatable, then it really added to the creep factor. Like they got it right with that, and I think that the game was all the better for it. It's really hard to put stuff like that in an action game, especially one where you're as powerful as Samus is, and have it be an effective like creep factor. But it worked really well for this game. Like Metroid Dread had that creep factor very well tuned. I place per my last email in attack position. Per my last email allows me to summon my previous email from the discard pile. I place my previous email in the defensive position, then place no worries if not face down, and end my turn. Take that, Kaiba. No, this happens to me a lot, especially in customer service position, because you sit there and you send an email, and a lot of times the customers only read like the first couple lines of the email, and then they'll respond to that and not read the rest of it. And so a lot of times you have to tell them, yes, I explained all of this as continued information in that email. And I don't think that the customers really find it rude. I think that it's more like, oh, I realized that I read these first couple lines and didn't read the rest of it. Something that, I mean, I do as well. So I don't really find it offensive if somebody's like, okay, as per my last email, it's like, okay, where in the last email did they say this? Okay. And if I don't see it, then I'm like, okay, where was this in your email? Because I don't see it. And then usually they'll repeat it without too much trouble. And that's kind of what you have to do. You know, we're humans. We're not going to have it all the time. We're not always going to be top of our game. And I'm sure you can hear it in my voice that, you know, I've been very sick for a little bit and my voice has completely pretty much given out. So, but in the end, you miss things. It's just part of human nature. So, but this is good. I like the Yu-Gi-Oh reference. Players. So Bungie, what have you got for me today? Bungie. We fired our lead musical composers as a cost-cutting measure. Ha! Wait, you serious? Yeah. Companies do a lot of stuff to cut costs that wind up costing them more. a lot of people love the soundtracks in video games, and a bad soundtrack can really turn you off of a game. Bad sound design, bad, one of the things that draws people to games a lot is the composition of the game, the music, the visuals, stuff like that. There is this real compendium of people who work together to make a game memorable and get you money. It's one of those things that if you give these creative people a little bit of leeway, then they can create something that people will talk about for years. And the problem is that you wind up cutting them out as a cost-cutting measure, and your income goes down. Like, you cut them because you're spending too much, and you think you're going to be making that same amount of money, but with less overhead cost. But you're not. You're making less money with less overhead cost, and that's often the trade-off. It's like, okay, you're not paying as many people to make the game as good, but not many people are paying for a game that's not as good. So a lot of companies make these particular decisions, and I'm not really a fan of them. Like, you get what you pay for in the end. If you want a lot of money, you pay a lot of money. It's just how it goes. Me that grew up with SNES and PS1, kids on Reddit saying 30 FPS games are unplayable. Yeah, you look like the clown. No, I would reverse this, because honestly, I don't see a problem with 30 FPS, and these people who are like, oh, 20, 25 FPS is terrible, and it's like, well, Super Mario 64 was usually around 25 FPS, and that was a kind of an iconic game. In fact, a lot of times there were reasons to limit the frame rates in those games, and part of the reason is because the physics were calculated on the frame rate. So every frame, physics were being calculated. With increased frames, then you got more calculations than were needed, and that kind of made things go a little crazy, like characters moving way too fast, things hitting way too hard. You know, you have a knife that goes through a character, and every single frame, then that gets calculated into the damage. And I think that there's a few games nowadays that are still suffering from that, where because of the frame rate, then you can deal more damage with a knife and actually kill things with a knife you normally shouldn't have been able to kill, because the number of frames that knife is passing through the character gets calculated as damage. And then you have the problem with that, with the frame rate being so high, every single frame being calculated for damage. And so, yeah, there are reasons for it, and I don't think that 30 or even 25 FPS games are unplayable. Like, I think that once you get down to maybe like the teens or tens, then maybe. But when you grow up with stuff like that, you're used to it, and that's kind of normal. Her, why do you keep yelling? I thought video games were supposed to be relaxing. Me, he was one shot. Yeah, either one shot away from being defeated, or it was one shot and he killed you. Both of which caused me great ire. The biggest problem being with one-shot kills, like with bosses that have a one-shot kill attack, or normal enemies that have a one-shot kill attack, it takes a lot of the skill out of the game, because you're just hoping that they don't use that one-shot kill. And you can get down to, it doesn't matter how low of health, if they use that one-shot kill attack and you aren't perfectly lined up for it, then you're dead. Like, and all of that hard work was for nothing. And so, yeah, it makes you upset. I also, when you get a boss down low enough, and then all of a sudden they just pull stuff out of their rear end and manage to kill you with basically having one shot left on their health bar. Like, you try and get a little bit greedy, especially in Dark Souls. But that also is kind of frustrating, because it's like, if I had just waited for the next actual opportunity, then they'd be dead. But no, now I've got to start back from the beginning. And I really don't mind. Bosses are kind of the reason you play the game. So those are the things that I don't mind doing over and over again. But hopefully the run back isn't too bad, like Dark Souls 2. Those had terrible run backs. Absolutely horrible. Honey, can you pause that for a second? It's an online game, Mom. I can't pause it. Huh? Yeah, well, this also comes in as a problem with Dark Souls and Souls-like games where you also can't pause. Like, you have to actually be in a safe area in order to leave the game because there are enemies that are still going off the global timer and are going to absolutely annihilate you if you pause or leave the game for any extended period of time. So not just an online game problem, but I do kind of get the point of the meme is, yeah, you can't always pause. And it's one of those things that it comes in conflict with parents. Like, I know for me it comes in conflict with my children, but because I'm a gamer, I do kind of understand. Like, I'm a bit more understanding of that there are games you can't pause. But it is one of those problems that comes up that I do wish that developers would allow. Okay, if they're paused, then you make them as an object or something like that. You don't have to pause the online game, but make that character an object so that things can't come up to it, attack it, interact with it in any way once it's paused. It's just paused, you know, that person, that character is just there, just not there. Like, you can't interact with it, so you have the ability to leave the game without losing all your stuff. That's just my opinion, but in the end, I know that there are some games that that's part of the point, is they don't want you to be able to be menuing while other things are going on. Like, it kind of breaks the reality and immersion, I guess. But in the end, it's a video game, okay? It's just supposed to be fun, so don't worry about breaking immersion. Just worry about making the game fun. When you find a random collectible in a game and you get a notification saying 1 of 500 found. Now, this is a nightmare for completionists like me, because completionists like me like to collect all 500 of these things. And the problem is that a lot of times they put them in really annoying spots or really hard to get to spots that really aren't worth the collectible. The problem with having so many of a particular type of collectible is that it degrades the quality of the collectible. Like, it's everywhere. You just collect it everywhere. And so when you go through a huge to-do to get this collectible, and it's just that, it's 1 of 500, then it just doesn't feel satisfactory. It doesn't feel like it's worth it. And a lot of times at the end of the quest, then the reward you get isn't really worth it either. Batman did this with the Joker, or the Riddler trophies, and the problem that I had with those is that some of them were super easy, some of them were really annoyingly difficult, and it just kind of took away from the value that those things had, especially because in the end all you actually got was to beat the Joker, which wasn't really that hard. Or not the Joker, the Riddler. The Riddler and the Joker, they get mixed up. Anyway, but that's kind of my problem with huge collectible amounts, is the fact that it's just so much that it degrades that value that they have. That one crystal in every game that's randomly scattered around the map and looks cool but can't be mined, broken, or eaten. I don't know if you'd really want to eat those types of crystals, but in the end, I know exactly what this is about. This happened to me most recently in Ratchet & Clank. The things that look collectible but actually are not collectible. Just give us something, you know? Just a little, I don't know. If it looks cool and it looks collectible, just give us something for it. Just a little, I don't know, even just, oh, you found 1 of 500 crystals, right? You know, just like we were talking about with the last meme. It's just something to, like, fill that dopamine of having found something cool and wanting to have a memorabilia of it. You know, that's kind of all that we want. We're gamers. We're very simple creatures. I don't like the person I become whenever I have to enter my username and password using a TV remote. I don't like the person I become when I have to enter my username and password, period. Like, seriously, everything is done with pins nowadays, and as long as they don't have physical access to your devices and stuff like that, then PIN is perfectly good for the physical device itself. Then if they try and access it remotely or whatnot, then you use the username and password. But if it's on a specific device, then just use a PIN. Like, I do really like nowadays how they're using the QR codes in order to do the username and passwords. They've been doing that with Steam for a while, and they do it with a few other things like Plex and other things nowadays. I think that Netflix recently jumped on that bandwagon. So there are solutions coming down the pipeline. Hopefully this will be a past problem and no longer a current, very mind-numbingly annoying problem. My parents think just because they feed, clothe, and house me, it's okay to interrupt me while I'm playing video games on the devices they pay for. Yeah, it is okay. There is such a sense of entitlement with certain demographics nowadays. I'm not going to even say certain kids, because even despite some parents, some enabling parents, there are a lot of really good kids nowadays. But certain demographics of people nowadays really seem to have it out for their entitlement. And yeah, let me tell you something. If my kid has a problem with me interrupting them while they're playing video games, I'll remove the problem. The video games will no longer be something that they play. That way, I'm not interrupting them on video games. That way, I'm not interrupting them while they're doing whatever they're doing instead of what I'm telling them to do. After all, I am the parent. I am in charge of their education, and when I'm sitting there educating them or talking to them, or I have them do something as part of their growing up and educational experience, then they need to be paying attention. And I'm sorry if you really don't like that. Don't really care. It's not really my problem whether you like my parenting style or not. But it is one of those things that kids need to learn respect. They also do need to learn that games are of secondary importance. Like, it is more important to listen to your parents, to be obedient, than it is to be playing video games. Like, that's, and of course, you know, being obedient is subjective to the situation, but, and who's requiring you to be obedient. But usually when somebody benevolent is asking you to do something, then you do it because it is for your good. Come join me Monday through Saturday for continued gaming content. I do Let's Plays, walkthroughs, streamings, all sorts of stuff, as well as memings, as you can tell. So join me as we build this channel together.